In the north corner, representing the men, the humans, the alphas, the grass touchers, the ball knowers, it is Evan Silva.
Oh, it's good to be back. It's good to be back. Trying to defend my title after whipping Leone. And we are going to continue to save fantasy football from the spreadsheet socialists. We are making fantasy football great again.
And in the south corner, representing the machines, the virgins, the spreadsheet socialists, the pale ones, it is Michael Leone.
I'm feeling ready to whoop on Gollum stuck in his cave there in the dark. Last time Evan wore that shirt, he couldn't quote one line from the U.S. Constitution, but we get it's all for show. So, yeah, let's get on with it.
On today's show, we are going to have an old-fashioned debate. We have identified the 20 players Silva and Leone disagree most on. They will state their case, and I, serving as your honorable judge, will declare a winner. I'll be citing Evan's personal top 150. I'll be citing our ETR half PPR season-long rankings here for what Leone is representing. We are going to do another man versus machine on August 11th, but on that one, we will take some of your questions. So if you have questions stemming off of today's show, drop them in the YouTube comments. We will read through them and go over some of them on August 11th. Start with number 20. It is Jameson Williams. Evan Silva has Jameson Williams 30th overall, the wide receiver 15. ETR ranks are at 45 overall, the wide receiver 23. Evan, I will let you kick it off here with being higher, significantly higher than Leone on Jameson Williams.
This is a bet on talent play for me. Jameson Williams, one of the most explosive and electrifying players in the league. I think that the Lions' new offensive coordinator, John Morton, is going to streamline the offense. He's going to feature Jameson Williams and Jahmyr Gibbs over other ancillary players. Ben Johnson tried to keep everybody happy. He was throwing, touchdown passes deep in the red zone to back up offensive tackles. We're not going to see that anymore under John Morton. I think the Lions are going to throw the football more. They have the third toughest schedule in the league. They have lost quite a bit of talent, especially on the offensive line, and they play in arguably the toughest division in the league. The camp reports on Jameson Williams have been sensational, and I think that there is a chance that Jameson Williams can have such a big third-year breakout that he can actually take some target volume away from Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I'm a little bit lower right now than consensus on Amon-Ra St. Brown because I think that Jameson Williams is going to dig into his target share at least a little bit. And the efficiency, like Jameson Williams averaged over 17 yards per reception last year, the efficiency is just off the charts. And I want to bet on that talent.
Leone, your retort on Jameson Williams.
Yeah, I mean, the major difference here in terms of the rankings is we're trying to set people up to give them the best chance possible, obviously, to win at fantasy football, not necessarily going out of our way to try and look smart, be right at the end of the season. And Silva is better than anyone else at a lot of these football takes and getting a lot of this stuff right. But when we're applying this in a fantasy setting, there's just no reason to take Jameson Williams at pick 30. We're also ahead of ADP. We also, like Silva, see Detroit throwing the ball more, see Jameson Williams as a bet on talent play, take that efficiency. People undervalue that. That gives you a really high floor along with a ceiling if you do get the volume. But there is that if you do get the volume and you don't want to draft him at a point where he has to cut in to Amon-Ra St. Brown to pay off. You want that to be the bonus. You want him to be in a spot where you get a lot of profit potential if you're taking him. And do disagree a little bit about the Amon-Ra St. Brown side of things. Jameson Williams had a true breakout last year. Sam Laporta was solid second half of the season. Amon-Ra, still their go-to guy, still 25% target share. To be able to do that in this offense is really incredible. He is a unique slot player. He's going to command the most volume on this team. And there's just no reason to be taking Jameson Williams at pick 30. You can get him a round and a half later, and there's just way less opportunity cost at that point in the draft.
Okay. I want to be clear that I am going to be scoring this not on do I like the player or not. No one cares about that. I'm going to be scoring on who made the better argument. In this case, for number one, I am giving the edge to Mr. Evan Silva getting a win here first. I mean, listen, if the only argument that Leone has is, well, we can get him later, that's a pretty thin argument.
Okay.
We're going to be out there. If we're out there knowing ball and touching grass, Jameson Williams, 24-year-old potential breakout.
Well, Leone just came out trying to get personal. He started his argument trying to get personal with me, like I'm trying to make some fashion statement out here with Jameson Williams. I'm not.
Is your goal to win or to like look smart at the end of the season? I'm trying to get guys that are going to be difference makers on the rosters of the fantasy audience that look at my rankings. I want difference makers. Where you take those players has a really huge impact on whether or not they're going to be difference makers.
Evan, would you?
He based his entire argument off of like a personal jab at me.
Yes. Would you, at least though, Evan, would you concede that if people are using their rankings, they should understand they don't have to take Jameson Williams at 30th overall to get him?
Of course. I mean, you have to have some knowledge of ADP and some context. That's why it's helpful to, draft, do reps, like get reps, draft more before your big draft. Go on underdog, play the $5 games, play the $3 games, whatever. Rack up a bunch of volume, get reps in, and see where guys are going, and you can apply that in your own drafts.
Actually, Evan, I'm not sure if you've followed our sponsors, but we're advising people to play on DraftKings this year. Just putting that out there. Okay, let's go to player number 19. It's going to be Trey McBride. I'll let Leone go first here. Silva is at 39 overall. The tight end 3 on Trey McBride. So Evan has Trey McBride behind George Kittle. ETR ranks are at 25 overall. The tight end 2, only behind Brock Bowers on Trey McBride. Leone, I'll let you start here on being higher, significantly higher than Silva here on Trey McBride.
Yeah, Trey McBride caught 17 more passes than George Kittle had targets last year. So we're really just getting super aggressive on George Kittle if we're going to rank Trey McBride behind that. He's the alpha on his offense. The touchdowns for him are a legitimate knock, but they're also at a point where they just can't get any lower. And he was also amazing last year with 2 touchdowns. Certainly expecting George Kittle to have a higher yards per target, higher TD rate than Trey McBride, but it's not going to be enough to offset a huge discrepancy in volume, especially if we catch any TD regression for Trey McBride, whereas Kittle's likely to go the other way. As amazing as he is in real life, as good as and efficient as he's been, his efficiency last year was still even outlier for him. That's going to claw back some. CMC's back. This offense is going to be running the ball more than they did last year. So there's going to be less pass volume. There's going to be CMC to contend with. There's going to be natural regression in the efficiency. I like George Kittle, but Trey McBride, in terms of his volume earning ability, 2 years in a row, is just in a special tier of tight ends, which is a tier ahead of George Kittle.
Strong argument there. Evan, go ahead on your reply.
Well, I think that Marvin Harrison Jr. has a chance to take a really big step forward and become more of a focal point after Trey McBride operated as the Cardinals' focal point last year. I also think that George Kittle has a chance to take a big step forward and not be that guy who is surviving on insane efficiency on 5-6 targets per game, but gets a few more targets per game than that and takes a step forward with his volume and remains highly efficient because Brandon Ayuk is not going to be playing for months potentially, because Deebo Samuel is gone, because there's just a vacuum there of targets that are there to be had. Why wouldn't they go to George Kittle? I think this can be an absolute monster year for George Kittle. We've seen when other guys are out of the offense, like George Kittle can absolutely capitalize on that. I also think that there's a chance because of all these rookies that are all over the 49ers defense. And I think that Robert Saleh will be able to coach them up and they'll get better as the season progresses. But coming out of the gate, I think that this defense could struggle in San Francisco and they end up having to throw the ball more. And that would benefit George Kittle and to a lesser extent Ricky Pearsall, especially because of no Deebo and because Brandon Ayuk is not going to be available for quite a while.
Yeah. I'm going to give the win here to Leone. I just think it's a bit of hope casting that Kittle's suddenly going to see a spike in volume. Now, I understand that there's good arguments for it. Certainly the ones that Evan brought up. The splits without Deebo for George Kittle are very, very strong. But yeah, I mean, for a guy to go from averaging 4 to 6 targets per game to suddenly trying to compete with a guy who's getting 10. And also the Marvin Harrison stuff, I find that to be hope casting as well there. So, or wish casting, I guess is the correct term. So I'll give the win to Leone there on Trey McBride. Let's go to 18, Ken Walker. Evan Silva is at 58 overall, the RB 19. Leone decently higher here, 41 overall, the RB 16. So you're a little bit lower here, or decently lower here on Kenneth Walker than Leone. Evan, go ahead on that one.
Yeah, it's funny. In terms of positional ranks, I'm not that much lower. I'm at RB 19, he's at RB 16. But overall, like if you're going off the top 150, you're probably not getting Kenneth Walker. And if you're using Leone's top 150, good chance that you might. I'm scared of number one, there's a new offensive coordinator in Seattle, Clint Kubiak, who I think probably will do a pretty good job, all things considered. But there is a major talent issue right now. I mean, you want to talk about wish casting, Sam Darnold behind what by any offensive line ranking is a bottom 5 offensive line. 67% of their 3 receiver set is composed of Cooper Kupp and Marquez Valdez-Scantling right now. And, I don't know for sure that Kenneth Walker is going to be the lead back in Seattle. I think it could be Zach Charbonnet. I don't know because there's a new offensive staff there that, was not there when these guys were drafted. Zach Charbonnet was a second-round pick. He's a very different kind of back than Kenneth Walker, and I think in all likelihood they'll just end up splitting the workload. But I do not have a strong, confident feel that this is going to be Kenneth Walker's backfield or that he's going to be successful because of the environment around him.
Okay, I agree with a lot of those takes. Let's hear the reply, Leone.
Yeah, I mean, Silva has Kenneth Walker ranked behind backs like Alvin Kamara, who are very risk in terms of, you talk about systemic team risk. Alvin Kamara aging back on a team that's not going to, probably win a lot of games and is going to struggle. You've got Tony Pollard ahead of him, who is, competing with a younger back behind him, also on a team that's not very good. Whereas Kenneth Walker, if we're making a bet in this range at running back, this is the type of bet you want to make. Yes, there's some team concern, but the flip in OC, I think, is a good thing for Kenneth Walker. They've clearly signaled that they not only want to run the ball more, but they want to run much more efficiently. They had a tough time blocking for Kenneth Walker. Still have some OL concerns, but schematically, things should take a real big step forward. The head coach for Seattle has been gushing over Kenneth Walker since he got in there day one. This is not a split with Zach Charbonnet. This is Kenneth Walker's backfield. And from a talent perspective, we know he has breakaway run ability. He's one of the bigger game breakers in the league. He was PFF's 4th highest rushing grade among all running backs last season. He was 3rd in their elusive rating, which heavily factors in forced missed tackles. I did the offseason projections podcast with Ben Gretsch, and he talked about if this blocking scheme can get Walker to the second level a little bit more last year, we could see a massive switch in efficiency for him, even with some of the OL issues.
God. I think you both made great arguments, to be honest. And this is why I've struggled with Kenneth Walker. I've been like, even with the field roughly on Kenneth Walker drafting, because I don't really have a strong taker. I thought you both made great arguments. I'm going to give it slight win here to Silva based on the Charbonnet concerns. I know it's thin, but unlike some other spots, I kind of agree with Evan that you could see spots where they get behind in games and all of a sudden you get a ton of Zach Charbonnet snaps here instead of Kenneth Walker on this team. Also, one point neither of you brought up, maybe we can get to this when we get to the JSN stuff, but if Sam Darnold does indeed face plan, obviously Kenneth Walker's probably in trouble anyways, but if they go to Jalen Milroe, almost certainly would this offense be in a bit more trouble.
But it's going to be very run heavy, and mobile quarterbacks can be helpful to rushing efficiency for their running back counterparts.
All right, let's go to one that has a wide gap here. Number 17 is Christian Kirk. Silva is at 88 overall. The wide receiver 45 on Christian Kirk. Leone 126 overall. The wide receiver 56. Leone, it is your turn to go first here on being significantly lower than Silva on Christian Kirk.
Yeah, look, I like Christian Kirk. He's fine. He's 29, coming off injury shortened season, solid producer, consistently, good efficiency, not insane. Um, Decent chance he keeps the slot role all season, but there's definitely some questions here on ceiling for Christian Kirk, and that's what it comes down to. We fast forward to the end of the season. I think Silva's probably going to end up being closer to his final mark. But as far as how it impacts you for fantasy, I don't know if he's going to be a needle mover. It's a team that showed they like to run last year. They have offensive line issues. There's target competition. You have a true alpha in Nico Collins here if you look at his yards per route run data. They bring in Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel, two rookies they have to contend with, particularly Jaden Higgins. And it's a floor play. I'm not making a floor play here. I'm taking a chance on some higher ceiling guys that Silva has ranked below Christian Kirk, the rookies, Matthew Golden, Luther Burden, Keon Coleman in particular. I think if you're going for a safer play at wide receiver, Khalil Shakir is the odds-on favorite to lead the Buffalo Bills in targets. There's just a lot better options in Christian Kirk, whether you're going for safety or upside. I take Kirk a good bit in the 100s for best ball to round out a wide receiver room. But we're talking about a rank that's much, much more aggressive than that.
Okay. Evan, go ahead on Christian Kirk.
I don't know about you, Adam, but I think that I heard a little hint of capitulation in there with Leone saying that he concedes that Silva will probably end up being closer to Christian Kirk's final result, which
we need a progressive scoring system here.
I would agree with that. I think that the Texans right now in their current state, with the state of their offensive line in particular, I mean, the Texans might have the worst offensive line in the league again this year. They really did nothing promising to upgrade it. They got rid of arguably their two most talented offensive linemen in Laramie Tunsil and Shaq Mason. It was something that they felt that they had to do, as we discussed on the offensive line show. But I think this is going to end up being a high-volume pass team, and they lost Joe Mixon, who I don't think we expect him to play anytime soon. And he's like their grinder back between the tackles. I think that in their current state, the Texans are going to have to be a team that throws the ball a lot short. And Christian Kirk is going to run high percentage routes in the slot. I think that Christian Kirk can do a lot of the things that Tank Dell did, and also a lot of the things that Stephon Diggs did for this offense last year when those guys were healthy. Christian Kirk has a history of winning both inside and outside. In Arizona, he was a perimeter receiver, and he has morphed into a slot receiver. That's what he's going to play. He's going to be a high-volume slot receiver in Houston, and I think he's the perfect complement to Nico Collins, who is your classic X receiver on the outside. I think that where our disagreement really comes down to, Leone and I's, is that he is much higher than I am on Jaden Higgins. And I'm much higher than he is on Christian Kirk. And I think that Jaden Higgins will end up just being – I think he'll have a nice rookie season, but I think that he's going to be more of a role player on the outside. And Christian Kirk, because of the offensive environment, because they're going to have to throw the ball short a lot. I think that Woody Marks might be their lead back for the majority of the season. Christian Kirk is going to be fed at slot receiver.
Just a quick follow-up, Evan. Do you have any concerns that they use number 79 overall pick on Jalen Noel, or Noel, I think it's pronounced, who profiles as kind of seems like a similar-ish player to Christian Kirk?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Christian Kirk is just a lot better player at this stage of their respective careers, and I think that Jalen Noel can contribute as a returner. And Christian Kirk doesn't have a clean injury history, so if something were to happen to him, I think that Jalen Noel would step in and get an opportunity. But I think it's Christian Kirk's role not to lose. I think it's just Christian Kirk's role.
Okay. Another really good debate here. I think Leone's point that at this range of the draft, I'm trying to hit home runs more than just solid picks makes me a little bit lean his way here. I'll go ahead and give this one to Leone, but certainly a really good debate on both sides of this Christian Kirk thing. I think understanding the team type that you have, if you just need some solid production at wide receiver, I think Christian Kirk can be a really good pick, as Evan outlined well. Let's go to number 16. We're going up towards the top of the board now. Christian McCaffrey. And Silva is at 15 overall on Christian McCaffrey. Leone at 7 overall here on Christian McCaffrey. I believe it is Leone's turn to go first, or no? It's
Silva's turn.
Silva's turn to go first. Silva, this is going to be very few people are going to be able to get Christian McCaffrey at your rank here of 15.
No one's going to get him.
No one's going to get him here at 15 overall.
And this is purely a bet, purely an age and workload bet against Christian McCaffrey, 100%. Because he will be 29 and a half when the season starts. He has almost 2,000 career touches on his NFL resume. He had over 700 touches in his 3-year college career. And I'm betting against him holding up. I mean, and that's purely what this is. I have him as a second round fantasy pick. So, I have him high relatively, but in the context of where other people have him, like some people have him like 7th overall, I'm obviously lower than that because I think that there's just too much risk. Like, this is the best fantasy first round I can remember. And I've been doing this for, I think, almost 2 decades at this point. Yeah, I think this is like my 19th year doing fantasy. And I can never remember such a good first round. So I'm going to take another guy who isn't a 29 and a half year old running back coming off an injury shortened season with almost 3,000 touches on his college and pro resumes. I'm going to take another guy because I feel a lot more confident in that player holding up, and that player's probably like 5 years younger than Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, and one outcome that I think Leone should address is like maybe he's healthy, but not the same player that he once was, right? What if the efficiency is down, the explosiveness is down, and that piles onto the risk of just flat missing games? But yeah, Leone, go ahead on Christian McCaffrey at 7 overall here.
Yeah, this is a challenging debate to have because if you just have in your mind like this guy's injury prone and he's old, then I'm not going to take him. I don't know what I can say to convince you otherwise. Historically, if you look at these extremely talented fantasy stud backs that have made it to their age 29 season, the history is really good on these backs. There's a survivorship bias there. These backs don't just wilter and fall off. Obviously, CMC coming off the disappointing season last year, I'm guilty of not paying enough attention to the calf injury last offseason heading into the year. But all the reports right now are that he's fully healthy at age 29. And we have him ranked 7 with like the most conservative set of inputs we could possibly do. We've docked his ceiling on top of being extremely conservative on his base inputs, and we can't get him lower than 7. This is a guy where if he is truly fully healthy and back, he's the number 1 player in all of fantasy. And I agree with Silva. It's a great first round. It's very deep. But at some point, if you're playing this game and you're not taking the guy with the clearest, best ceiling case in all of fantasy football, I think you're doing it wrong, and you need to just nut up and take a little bit of risk. And that's where I'm at on CMC. I think it's fine to even take him earlier, but I'm not taking Drake London, who I like, over Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey's the guy who can single-handedly win you your league.
Yeah, I would never take Christian McCaffrey over Drake London either. However, I'm going to give the win to Silva here just because I think for people that are playing one league, I have no problem whatsoever. Like, you have one big league with all your boys. I have no problem whatsoever being like, you know what, man, I'm just going to play it safe in round 1. I actually think that's like especially when round 1 is so strong. Now, if you're going to push him beyond Drake London, that's not something that I would do. But if you want to say, hey, give me something safe, I don't know, Malik Neighbors, give me Derrick Henry in a half PPR touchdown heavy format, give me something like that instead of taking the risk in round 1 with Christian McCaffrey. And I do think I'm like the biggest injury prone is nonsense guy you'll find. I do think that Christian McCaffrey is more likely than other workhorse backs to get hurt this year, even though they're all likely to get hurt.
I have to say, I think that Leone actually, that might have been the best argument that he's presented for any of the players that he's argued for so far. I mean that like sincerely. Like, he made a really good argument. And I acknowledge in my 150, like I have a one-liner on every player, and I'm like, obvious injury risk, but overall RB1 finish still very much in his range of potential outcomes.
Sure.
So, I'm right there with him. And this is probably my scariest fade because I'm on the 49ers this year.
The only thing I just want to add
kind of need Christian McCaffrey to be healthy to get there. So I mean, I understand where he's coming from, and I really understand the industry-wide high ranking on Christian McCaffrey. It's just I'm going to take Brian Thomas in the first round. He's 6 years younger than Christian McCaffrey, and I think he can be the wide receiver 1 overall this year. You know what I mean? So
we'll get to him. We'll get to him. Don't worry. Yeah.
The only thing I just say is like Pat Crane's done a lot of research on this, looking at legendary running back seasons. And the thing people miss a lot of the times is a lot of these running backs end up more fragile than you think they are. And people tend to focus too much on floor and not enough on ceiling. We're already discounting. We're giving him the injury tax by having him at 7.
Absolutely.
Like he's already taxed. So I don't agree with like you're playing one league, play it safe. I think that's absolute cowardice.
Okay. Nevertheless, he's calling the ref a coward. However, and therefore Silva got the win.
I think he called us both cowards.
We move on. Let's go to
Leone's in the room with a couple of cowards.
Let's go to player number 15 as we work our way down here towards one is Chris Olave. Silva significantly higher than Leone here. Silva is at 48 overall, the wide receiver 25 on Chris Olave. Leone 62 overall, the wide receiver 33. Leone's turn to go first here on Chris Olave.
Yeah, this is a difficult one because similar to Jameson Williams, Christian Kirk, we're picking a player that both of us are ahead of ADP on by like a meaningful amount. So a lot of this stuff comes down to me, like what's the best way to play fantasy? Like, is it really drafting as if you're right or giving you some wiggle room where maybe, you know, having some deference to the market, understanding that you're not always going to be right and you want to be able to be wrong and still win. You don't want to have to be right to win. So, like, I have a tough time. I mean, I like Chris Olave. His yards per out runs right up there. Year 2, he was coming in as a prospect right up there with Drake London and Garrett Wilson, 2 receivers that go in the first 3 rounds. I think the market's overly concerned about the shoddy quarterback play and they're triple counting that. Kellen Moore is going to run a high-paced offense. I like Chris Olave. It's just at a certain point, I think we're way too aggressive on a team that certainly does carry systemic risk. Do I think the market overvalues that? Yes, but do I think Silva's also undervaluing the risk right now. We've got Hayner taking first team reps right now. We don't know what it's going to look like at quarterback. And I'm, again, also not that much into like reading between the injury leaves. There's a little bit of concussion risk history with Chris Olave. I mean, I throw that out there. I don't even really buy into it too much, but just want to note that there is a little bit of elevated risk when you've got, you know, receivers in front of him just with massive ceilings, some of which Silva likes as well, but like Jaylen Waddle, Travis Hunter, Zay Flowers, Devontae Smith, these are players you can take ahead of Chris Olave.
Silva, go ahead on Olave.
Yeah, I'm just betting that Chris Olave can catch some positive injury luck. And this is not, people say, oh, well, how can you say that when you just said all that about Christian McCaffrey? Chris Olave just turned 25 years old, like literally yesterday. His injuries are not like soft tissue stuff and knees. Like his stuff is concussions, which, I mean, that's scary. You know, like, don't get me wrong, but that is not a performance affecting injury. And also, we're not drafting Chris Olave in the first round. Okay. We're drafting him. I have him 48th overall. So that's what, at like the 4-5 turn. Mm-hmm. And I think you could get him anywhere in the 5th round this year. You could probably get him in like the early 6th. And I think you definitely pull that trigger. I think the Saints are going to be the worst team in the league this year. I think they're going to be playing from behind all year. I think that, you know, obviously they get to play so many games indoors. They play in a division where no one plays defense. As Leone mentioned, Chris Olave has been a yards per route run demon every single year of his career. Last year, with all kinds of stuff going wrong, he was at 2.23 yards per route run, which was top 20 in the NFL. He's a really good player. He's really young. And Kellen Moore not just wants to play fast. He said he wants to be the fastest team in the league this year. Yeah. And I think with Rashid Shaheed is not playing in the slot. He's a pure perimeter receiver. Brandon Cooks kind of could. He has before, but I think he's going to be, you know, very much a third wheel in New Orleans. I think we could see Chris Olave work in the slot more this year, kind of like what Kellen Moore did with Devontae Smith last season. And that gets him layup targets in the middle of the field. and sort of mitigates some of that risk, that systemic risk from the quarterback situation, which is scary. But running higher percentage routes will help that. And I think he's going to get a ton of targets. And at the end of the day, like, we are target hunting, especially in the 5th and 6th rounds. So I want to get Chris Olave on my teams this year.
Evan, have you seen the Underhill stuff? Your boy has been lately saying maybe Rashid Shaheed should actually be the number 1 receiver on this team. Maybe Rashid Shaheed is actually better. Not saying I agree with that, but I'm just saying that's at least been put out there by some Saints people out there. I don't think that's really a thing, but I just want to put that out there.
No, I think Rashid Shaheed is a certain type of receiver, and he's going to run downfield fly routes, and he's going to catch a bomb every now and again. And I think that Chris Olave is a true number 1.
Yeah, I actually like where Leone's rank is better, but just on argument, I think Silva made a very strong argument there for Chris Olave. I'm going to give that to Silva.
Silva's cracked the code by being higher on players I'm higher on, so I can't make it a counter argument.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great strat.
Crack the scoring system.
Exactly, yeah.
And also, we should remind the audience that Leone actually, based on Levitan's judgments last year, Leone actually won from an argument standpoint. So
yes,
this is not necessarily predictive of what, like, Adam Levitan's judgments are not predictive.
1,000% great point. Let's go to player number 14, Jaydon Blue, Cowboys rookie running back. Silva is at 101 overall, the RB 34. Leone 148 overall, the RB 48. I believe it's Silva's turn here to go first on Jaydon Blue, allegedly lazy, as we talked about on yesterday's show. Evan, Jaydon Blue.
Yeah, and I think that there is some truth to that. I think that Jaydon Blue, because of how talented he is, and he is a sensational talent. He ran 4.38 at 5'9", about 200. I think he's got similarities from a talent standpoint and from a skill set standpoint to Devon Achane, who, by the way, was a 3rd-round pick. So he wasn't drafted particularly high. But Jaydon Blue went in the 5th round because, you know what? Some guys that are that talented, they don't have to work as hard as other guys. It just came natural to him. Jaydon Blue last year had 176 touches at Texas. He scored 14 touchdowns on 176 touches. He had 42 catches. In his college career, he averaged 9 yards per reception. I'm willing to be super aggressive on these players that I think have big upside. Jaydon Blue is a 5th-round pick. He could be nothing. He could be and apparently he's lazy. He could be a nothing burger, but I am willing to be aggressive in this range. I have him 101 overall, RB 34. Like, I just want to give myself a chance, especially in this range, to get a big time hit. And I think that Jaydon Blue can be a big time hit. I also think that the way that the offense is structured in Dallas, like, I don't think that they're going to have a true featured back. I think that they're going to have to throw the ball a lot. Their defense is garbage. Brian Schottenheimer likes to call pass first offenses. They've got Dak Prescott back. All their talent is in the passing game. They traded for George Pickens. CeeDee Lamb is going to have a monster year. They've got a really good offensive line. And Jaydon Blue fits that as a guy who could, sneakily work his way into being the lead back in Dallas, kind of like Devon Achane did in Miami.
Mm-hmm. All right. There is some redraft versus best ball nuance that I think we should mention here in strategy with Jaydon Blue, Leone, but go ahead with your reply.
Yeah, I think that nuance is when you get to the range of the draft that Silva's talking about, he's moving up some of these guys with upside a little bit more aggressively, as he should. Whereas in best ball, the base case kind of matters a little bit more. And it's, difficult to kind of weigh those things properly. I'd probably take Blue on my bench in a redraft setting earlier than we have him ranked. So some capitulation to Silva in that regard. I still think 34's pretty rich. He's got him ahead of players like Byshell Tuden. You want to take a rookie upside swing in an ambiguous backfield. That might be the better backfield for the player the team really, really wanted, who's got more of a workhorse upside and has better draft capital than Jaydon Blue, who, like, very explosive back. I think Silva lays out the bull case, which is they throw a lot and they can utilize his skill set, but he does have two veteran backs there to contend with in Miles Sanders and Javonte Williams. And Jaydon Blue, there's question marks over how much of a workload he can truly handle. He's a smaller back. In his entire college career, he has 214 carries. There's very few backs with that little volume that go on to make, like a real mark in the NFL level. So that's a knock against him. It's not a red flag that eliminates him, but it's something that makes him a little bit worse of a bet, I think, than some other, running back stashes you can make in that range.
Yeah. I'm going to give this one to Leone, basically because in the same range, we had the boring base play in Christian Kirk, which Evan caped for, but now he's changing his mind and going for the upside play here in this range. I do like in redraft taking these kind of guys a little bit higher than maybe the ETR rank, like Leone alluded to. If it doesn't work out, we just drop him and move on. Can't do that in best ball. So I think that makes a big distinction, but I will go with Leone here for the win on Jaydon Blue. Let's go to player number 13, Tony Pollard. Silva is at 59 overall, the RB20. Leone much lower, 74 overall, the RB26. You already alluded to it, Leone. It sounds like you have some Tyjae Spears trepidation here on Tony Pollard, but go ahead on Mr. Pollard's rank.
Yeah, a little bit of Tyjae Spears trepidation. That's certainly not all of it, but Tony Pollard at this point isn't like the explosive back that we remember him with Dallas. He was just at an average 4.2 yards per carry last season. And for non-elite backs, he's starting to get up there in age. When you're Christian McCaffrey, you survive into the early 30s. You're Derrick Henry, you survive. When you're Tony Pollard, the survival rates are a lot lower. The other thing is like where he goes and where Silva has him ranked. Something Ben Gretsch talks about a lot is you want to avoid the potential small hit, big miss players. You want players that are maybe a small loss, but a big hit. Tony Pollard's your small hit, big miss player when you're taking him over some of the rookies that, maybe get there when you look at how the ADP lines up. RJ Harvey, Travion Henderson. It's a rookie quarterback, which generally, unless they have a big breakout season like a Jaden Daniels, and we don't think Cam Ward's at that level, isn't great for the fantasy prowess of the rest of the team. And, so I think the combination of individual risk plus systemic risk makes him a player that, end of the season, he's probably going to be fine. But if he swings big one way or the other, he's much more likely to be a big bust than he is a big hit.
Compelling argument there. Silva, go ahead.
No, I think he can be a big hit. I think that the Titan. I'm a big fan of Cam Ward, number one. He just went number one overall in the draft. I think he can help elevate this Titans offense big time this year. I also think the Titans offensive line could be a top 12 unit, which they haven't had a good offensive line in years. This is the second year of Bill Callahan. They've made they've poured resources into this offensive line, multiple first-round picks, multiple big-ticket free agent signings. Tony Pollard is a high-floor pick. He has over 1,000 yards rushing in 3 straight seasons, and he has 96 catches over the last 2 years. The Tyjae Spears thing, we went through that last year. Like, Tony Pollard is way better than Tyjae Spears. It's not close. He ran laps around him last season. And I also think that Tony Pollard is legit good. So I disagree that this is and I like it when Leone and Gretchen and Crane talk about these guys that might be small hit, big miss. I like it when they use that. I don't think that that's the case for Tony Pollard, though. I think that he is high floor, high upside. I think his upside is underrated because I think of this situation, going from Will Levis to the number one overall pick in the draft, taking a step forward on the offensive line, I think that Tony Pollard can finish as a top 12 fantasy back right now. And I have him where you can get him at RB20 overall. So I think that he has a lot of room to grow off that RB20 overall rank. I think there's upside there.
Yeah, I'm going to give the win to Leone here. I think one thing he didn't mention but implied in the small hit, big miss stuff is Tony Pollard is 28 years old now. And like for non-elite backs, and we already talked about survivorship bias, but for non-elite backs, when you start to get to this age, it starts to be in that more bigger miss range. Then you do have some team risk here with Tony Pollard as well. So I will go with Leone there. Let's get to
just turned 28, by the way.
Just turned 28
in late April.
Correct. Player 12, Jaylen Warren. Silva is at 69 overall. The running back 24. Leone 86 overall. The RB 29. 69 overall is going to open some people's eyes here, Evan. But I actually believe it's it's Evan's turn to go first. 69 overall on Jaylen Warren. Go ahead on that, Evan.
Yeah, and I've been pretty consistently ahead of market on Jaylen Warren. I'm going to stay that way because I think he's a really good player. In terms of his broken tackle rate, he's always scored really high in that metric, and that's one of the best metrics for running backs. He's really good in the passing game. Caleb Johnson, who they drafted to potentially be a volume workhorse. I mean, I think that's what his skill set suggests. Not a factor in the passing game. Also a third-round rookie. And there's some narrative behind my analysis here. No question. Like, what if Caleb Johnson gets in the game and blows a blitz pickup? You think Aaron Rodgers is going to be cool with that? Like Jaylen Warren is a very reliable player, good in all facets. And that's the kind of player who I think that Aaron Rodgers is going to want out there next to him in the shotgun. Maybe Caleb Johnson will get there. I think the Steelers would like for him to get there. But I think that Jaylen Warren is a player that has a high floor. He's going to have a locked-in role. He's going to be, at worst, flex usable. And then if Caleb Johnson messes up, which, again, I mean, he's a third-round rookie who, was a very specific type of runner, needed to be in a specific type of scheme. He needed to be in the outside zone scheme, which is what he got with Arthur Smith. But, wasn't really a factor in the passing game and might be prone to errors. I mean, he's a rookie running back. So, and I think that Aaron Rodgers he's always placed a big time emphasis on trust. And I think that he's going to be able to trust Jaylen Warren to the extent that Jaylen Warren will definitely be out there probably like 50% of the time in terms of snaps. And then if Caleb Johnson messes up, that's where the upside comes in. And Jaylen Warren could be like an RB2 who sprinkles in some RB1 weeks. Okay.
Leone, your retort on Jaylen Warren.
I don't think this is the type of player you want to be 2 to 3 rounds ahead of ADP on. If you look at him last year, his efficiency fell off in a big way.
He was hurt last year.
5.3 yards per carry to 4.3 yards per carry.
Silva
talks about how Caleb Johnson could, maybe mess up and get off the field. This guy they drafted to come in and replace Najee Harris, the veteran who has coming off, you want to call it injury riddled, whatever reason you want to call it for the efficiency drop off, the veteran who has never broken out in a big way, that the team has never been willing to give a big workload to, that's the guy that's at risk when you bring in a rookie running back. And this is an offense, it's going to be slow paced, it's going to be run heavy, which is good for both of the backs, but it's going to be slow paced and probably below average in terms of scoring across the board. I would much rather take Caleb Johnson over Jaylen Warren straight up. The ceiling's much higher in terms of goal line carries and rushing efficiency upside combined with rush volume. Warren might get back up to that 5 yards per carry if he keeps to reduce volume, but certainly not in a big volume case. So there's other backs that Silva has ranked behind Jaylen Warren that have no business going behind Jaylen Warren. RJ Harvey is one of them, rookie running back there for Denver, where they're going to catch a lot of passes. And there's some upside there. There's also David Montgomery, if you want a safer back on a Lions team that just gives a ton of fantasy points to the position. And then he has this huge contingent upside if Jahmyr Gibbs were to get hurt or something. So I don't hate Jaylen Warren. He just has no business being ranked 3 rounds ahead of ADP.
Yeah.
So Jaylen Warren goes out there, busts his ass all year, trying to stay on the field, shows toughness, playing through injuries. And Leone comes back and uses that against him. That is just a classic spreadsheet socialist move if I've ever seen one.
I hear that part of the argument. I'm going to give this one to Leone based on his point. I thought the best point of the debate was Steelers have had this guy for 3 years and never really shown a willingness to give him a big workload or true featured role. And then they go out and spend 3rd-round pick here on Caleb Johnson.
They had a 1st-round pick there, Najee Harris.
That's true, who sucked, but whatever.
Yeah, I agree, but they drafted him in the first round. They thought he was good.
No debating with the judge. Let's go to let's go to number 11. Matthew Golden. Silva is at 102 overall, wide receiver 51. Leone significantly higher, 81 overall. The wide receiver 44. Leone, go ahead on first round rookie Matthew Golden in Green Bay.
Yeah, this is borderline irresponsible to be behind ADP on Matthew Golden in casual home leagues when he's going in the 90s. These are the types of picks that can win you leagues. We know rookie upside is one of the biggest factors to winning your fantasy football leagues, especially when you can get it at a cost like you can with Matthew Golden, where you don't even necessarily need to be drafting him as your starting wide receiver. And I think that there's an element with the market with Matthew Golden where they're being a little bit overconfident in their ability to decide which NFL rookies are good, which are bad. This is a first round rookie, really good draft capital for a team that has a need on outside wide receiver to get that true number one wide receiver. He's probably going to play 2 wide receiver sets, being starting from day one. And there's just an element of playing into the uncertainty here. This is the type of guy you want to be taking as wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 on your team, not a Christian Kirk type.
All right. Evan, go ahead on Matthew Golden.
Yeah, so Matthew Golden was not a big-time producer in college. He never reached 1,000 receiving yards in a season. We had Mike Renner on. Mike Renner, talked about the simulcast of Matthew Golden's 4.3 or whatever, 4.28 40 time.
Yeah.
A total farce.
A Fugazi.
He did not run that. So that was a fake, a deep fake, as some mates might say. This is a run first to balanced offense in Green Bay that is built around Josh Jacobs. And this offense, they're going to run the ball with volume. I mean, they have an offensive line that is better at run blocking than it is in pass protection. And also they have a defense that is going to keep this so games don't get out of control. They're not going to be a shootout team whatsoever. They're going to make sure that they're not a shootout team. They also like to play a ton of receivers. I mean, this is there are some teams like the Bills, Leone's Bills. They like to play like a rotation of 4 and 5 receivers. They like to play multiple tight ends. They believe in that as a philosophy. And I think that Jayden Reed is the player to target in Green Bay's receiver core, especially now that there are reports of him running in 2 receiver sets. And Matthew Golden is more of like a dynasty play. I think that he's unlikely to help you in redraft leagues this year.
Yeah.
I mean, I do have to say there's like an archetypical way of drafting where there's a bucket of players where if their market's going to give it to them at cost, you don't overthink it. Historically, these are the biggest win rate type players you can get. First round wide receiver that the market overthinks with Brian Thomas last year.
Yeah. Matthew Golden is not like Brian.
He's not Brian Thomas. He's not as talented as Brian Thomas. He's going 2 rounds later.
He did not have a fake 40 time.
But you're overconfident in your assessment of him. I don't know if he's going to be good. I'm not going to sit here and break down Matthew Golden and tell you for sure he's going to be good. I don't know.
You nailed Brian Thomas last year. This guy is not like Brian Thomas. Brian Thomas scored 17 touchdowns to lead the nation in his final season.
He's not like Brian Thomas. Right. He's not as nearly as good of a prospect as Brian Thomas, but there's an element of the market does undervalue these guys when they think the landing spot isn't good.
Yeah.
And there's just a chance that these guys are really good. More times than not, Silva's right. Golden's going to be a bust. And this just kind of goes back to if we want to rank players based on where they're most likely to finish, that's like a different conversation than if we're ranking players where they're most likely to help you win your league.
Yeah. This is a really hard one for me because I agree with most of Evan's points that it's most likely to be a really flat target share in Green Bay again. Like no one's going to separate. Matthew Golden is not going to immediately come in and start commanding 7 or 8 targets per game. On the other hand, I agree with Leone that like I'm taking Matthew Golden over Christian Kirk every single time because I'm looking for the upside. And so for that, I'll give the win to Leone here. But
I thought that we were debating Matthew Golden, not Matthew Golden versus Christian Kirk, but all right.
Yeah.
Well, that's how you have them ranked, dude.
That's a fair point. All right. Let's go to...
When Christian Kirk outscores Matthew Golden by like 30 points this year, I'm going to need an apology
Christian
on all
Kirk
your
is very likely to
all of
outscore
your
Matthew Golden
on
by
all
30
your
points.
social media platforms.
This is the whole crux of the philosophical. I 100% agree with you that Christian Kirk's is likely to outscore Matthew Golden by 30 points. Agreed.
See, this is where the socialists start to bend your brain, Evan. They're moving the goalposts around, but no,
we know where the goalposts are supposed to be. That's the problem. He's playing on the wrong field.
By the way, we don't need to worry about who I'm giving the win to now. Again, after the season, we will go back. There'll be some funny clips. Hopefully, you guys caught last year's of us saying ridiculous things. And we'll go back and see who actually won the debates. Okay. Let's go get into the top 10 here. Justin Fields. Silva is at 80 overall, the QB 6. Leone, 98 overall, the QB 11. Leone, go ahead on Justin Fields.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say right out of the gate, I don't feel super strongly on this one. I think I left in our notes that for us, the difference between QB 6 and QB 11 is like 12 spots. We have all these quarterbacks mustered together. And if your preference is Justin Fields, I think that's totally fine. I think quarterback's deep enough this year that I would rather wait and get Fields where we have him ranked than take him where Silva does. Obviously, we've seen the games that he breaks with his rushing ability and provides that huge ceiling. But we've also seen the games where he has a surprisingly low floor because he's just not that good as a real life quarterback, and that leads to problems. And that's kind of what we're factoring in here. I do think there's no bench risk here, which is great for Fields. It's something we dealt with last year. So from that standpoint, I think he's solid. If you're going in the year with him as your fantasy quarterback in typical redraft league, I think it's completely solid. Just think that QB6 is a little bit rich given his real life talent at playing quarterback, how that might impact the fantasy scoring side of things.
Evan, go ahead on Justin Fields.
I just think that Justin Fields has a real good chance to run for 1,000 yards and maybe 10 touchdowns. He already has an 1,134 yard, 8 touchdown rushing season on his resume. Every time that the Lions, who were coordinated defensively by Aaron Glenn then, faced the Bears, Justin Fields would just absolutely shred the Lions from a rushing standpoint. And as you mentioned, because Tyrod Taylor is next up on the depth chart, there is almost no benching risk. The Jets gave him decent money, 2 years, $40 million with $30 million guaranteed. I think that Leone likes Justin Fields. I mean, and I just like him a little bit more. He's going to easily be my highest owned quarterback. I have him in a tier with Mahomes and Kyler Murray, and I have him at the top of that tier. I have Fields quarterback 6, Mahomes quarterback 7, Kyler Murray quarterback 8, and I think that Fields can finish as a top 5 guy as well. So I understand, that Justin Fields isn't that great of a real life quarterback, but I think that he is an elite fantasy quarterback when he can make it through, 15, 16 games. And he is used like I think he's going to be used. I think the Jets are going to lead the NFL in rushing attempts this year.
Okay, I'm giving the win to Silva here. Leone came out of the gate and just capitulated right away in his argument, which if you've ever been to debate school,
fine with that.
Just capitulate right out of the gate. Yeah, by the way, Justin Fields 4th in fantasy points per dropback. That was last year under Arthur Smith with very little weaponry. I know the weaponry this year isn't great either, but man, it's really hard for me to see Justin Fields not finding a really good floor given his rushing ability this year. Ceiling is in doubt if he can throw, but man, if he can, it's just a total smash.
It's funny because Justin Fields, when he was coming out of Ohio State, he was known as a guy who was an athlete, but didn't really run that much.
Yeah.
And was more of like a pocket passer. And now it's completely flipped for Justin Fields. He's also only 26 years old still.
Let's go to player number 9 as we work our way towards the biggest debate of this 2025 season. Number 9 is Jerry Jeudy. Silva, 82 overall. The wide receiver, 42. Leone, 65 overall. The wide receiver, 35. So Leone significantly higher on Jerry Jeudy than Silva. Silva, go ahead on Mr. Jeudy.
Jerry Jeudy had a really nice season last year. It was really the first big fairly big time season of his career. I still don't know how good Jerry Jeudy is, and I say that as a player who loved him coming out of college, and then he was a disappointment for a long time. And so I don't know how good he is. The Browns had the worst offense in the league last year, and in terms of projected points, they're like bottom 3 again this year. They have mouths to feed. They've got David Njoku. They've got Cedric Tillman. They drafted the rookie tight end in the 3rd round that I think that they're going to work in. And they have 4 quarterbacks. I mean, they're almost like not a serious team right now. I don't know who's going to play quarterback. Look, if Joe Flacco is playing quarterback, I want Jerry Jeudy and I want David Njoku, but I don't know that he's going to play quarterback. I mean, I think there's a chance that they end up starting like 3 different quarterbacks over the course of the season. So I'm kind of throwing my hands up on this one.
Yeah.
And being like, you know what? There's just so much uncertainty here that I'm going to have Jerry Jeudy below his ADP, and I'm not going to get him, and I'm going to be all right with that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm operating under the assumption that at least 3 of these quarterbacks will make starts for the Browns this year. At least 3. But Leone, go ahead on Jerry Jeudy.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised that Silva has, such a willingness to take on Chris Olave in a super aggressive way on a team that has like.
Well, I know that Chris Olave is good. I know that Chris Olave is
right,
good.
but it's a huge discrepancy in the way you're treating these 2 players that have similar costs. It's not a small discrepancy on talent. Jerry Jeudy was a pretty strong, near elite prospect who, honestly, he's been pretty solid when you account for quarterback play. He's been at least 8.3 yards per target 4 consecutive seasons. I think one thing that people point to last year is they're like, oh, he put up these numbers when they went to Jameson and Flacco, and like that's not sustainable. Well, he played 7 games with Deshaun Watson playing one of the worst 7-game stretches at quarterback in NFL history. So you need to account for that side of things as well. When he got out of that absolute dumpster fire playing quarterback, he actually had a stretch of 5 weeks where he had 4 weeks individually going at 3 yards per route run or above. So I think this is someone that is pretty talented and is thrust into a spot where he just has to get a ton of the volume. There's not much target competition. And the market is just way too scared of the quarterback situation. They're staying away. If Joe Flacco was the quarterback the whole season, Jerry Jeudy would be like a 3-4 turn pick. That's how early he would go if you knew it was Joe Flacco. So you're going to say we can get him
Joe
at
Flacco is going to be the quarterback all season. I can tell you that. Like
we're getting Jerry Jeudy at the 6th. You're just hoping. Could you let me finish?
Hold on. Don't make me mute.
Decorum.
Don't make me mute the mics here. Let Leone finish, and then I'll give Silva a reply.
Let's show a little decorum, please. Jerry Jeudy's going at the 6-7 turn. Okay. There's also a chance that one of these quarterbacks that plays isn't as horrendous as we think they're going to be. So I just think the entire market is overly concerned with the quarterback play. If Jerry Jeudy was going early round 5, I'd say no way, but that's not the case.
All right. Silva, do you want to reply to this before I make my ruling?
I've made my points, and I rest my case. Just rack up another win for Leone.
I'm going to give this one to Silva. I think that
it's a miracle.
I think the point that not only are we not sure that Jerry Jeudy is good, and Leone had some good points why Jerry Jeudy might be good, but Steve Smith doesn't think that Jerry Jeudy is very good. And honestly, do we know more than Steve Smith? And so if Steve Smith doesn't think he's very good, and this is going to be the lowest scoring team in the league, that's the problem for me on Jerry Jeudy. So I'll give one to Silva there. Back-to-back wins for Silva.
One final note I just want to make on Jeudy is we have Cleveland, I believe, one of our teams with the biggest drop in pass rate of any team in the entire league. And we still project Jeudy as a value. And, we're just assuming they have to run the ball a whole ton more. If we're wrong, the target potential for Jerry Jeudy is really high, even if it is, somewhat inefficient. But Jerry Jeudy's been dealing with inefficient quarterback play his whole career.
Yeah. And they've also been one of the fastest teams in the league in terms of plays per game, have the Browns also under Stefanski. Okay. Let's go to player 8, Jake Ferguson. Silva is at 96 overall, the tight end 9. Leone 125 overall, the tight end 15. Leone, I'll let you go first on Jake Ferguson, who, as we discussed on yesterday's Rankings Change show, just got himself a nice new bag, did Jake Ferguson. So go ahead, Leone.
Yeah, I think we're a little bit light on Jake Ferguson on the projections machine side of things, and possibly a little bit light on Dallas. I'm very high on the Dallas passing offense, and it's 3 guys. It's Pickens, CeeDee Lamb, and Jake Ferguson. I think Jake Ferguson maybe ends up being a distant third of that group, but I'm probably going to override our guys and like undo our dock we have on Jake Ferguson's ceiling. I don't know if I'd have him 9. Like, I'm probably taking upside swings on Loveland and Warren ahead of him. But we've got Evan Ingram tight end 10 at cost. I'd rather have Jake Ferguson. So I'll be fine if Silva wins this one.
Oh my God!
Wow,
premature
capitulation.
capitulation. Evan, go ahead.
We're here to be honest. We're not here to dishonestly argue the other side.
Listen, the honest debate is something our country could certainly use. I don't think Evan would disagree.
I feel like we're reaching across the aisle
with
here.
that.
Jake Ferguson.
We spent a lot of time yesterday on Jake Ferguson, Evan. But anything to add here on Mr. Ferguson?
Yeah, I mean, Leone kind of made my case for me. I think that it's going to be an extremely pass-heavy offense in Dallas. The defense is going to be a problem, I believe, and they're going to have to throw the ball with extreme volume. They have done that historically with Dak Prescott, and when Dak Prescott was healthy in 2023, Jake Ferguson caught over 70 passes. And we love offenses in fantasy that are productive and condensed. And Leone already made that argument. You know, it's 3 guys. It's Pickens, it's CD, and it's Jake Ferguson. And really in this range of tight ends, I'm looking for guys that can score a lot of touchdowns. Now, I must admit, Jake Ferguson has never been a big-time touchdown scorer. But if Dak can throw 33, 35 touchdown passes, I mean, I think Jake Ferguson is going to have a chance at 8, 9, or 10. And in this range, I'm really touchdown hunting at tight end. But also I love the fact that he caught 70-plus passes just the last year that Dak Prescott was healthy.
Okay. Yep. Well, Leone already capitulated, so we will go ahead and give the win to Silva on Ferguson there. I always actually thought Ferguson was like one of the best values, period. That was before the George Pickens trade. After Pickens got there, I was like, well, I still like Ferguson. I don't think he's like one of the most smash values ever like I did before the Pickens thing. But yeah, still like Ferguson for sure. All right. We have the score here, by the way. It is currently Silva 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, Leone 5. So Silva with a current 7-5 lead here as we head down the home stretch. Player number 7 is Tetairoa McMillan. Silva is at 52 overall, the wide receiver 29. Leone decently higher here, 43 overall, the wide receiver 21. Silva, go ahead on Tetairoa, who, by the way, told everyone he's no longer wants to be called Tet. So that's why I'm trying to get his full first name here, Tetairoa McMillan.
So I'm just looking at the discrepancy in these rankings, and I am 9 spots below where Leone is on Tet McMillan overall, but I'm 8 spots below where Leone is from a positional standpoint. So this just must be a massive run of wide receivers.
It's also it's things like Waddle, who we'll get to, and JMO, who we'll get to, all those guys being ahead of McMillan for you too, like that whole range, I feel like.
Yeah.
So I'm proud of you. You've went very wide receiver heavy this year after the previous 2 years being very running back heavy in these ranks.
Yeah. So, I mean, you live and you learn, Leone. You know, you live and you learn. I'm trying to get better every year. You know, I don't feel like I've figured this whole thing out. You know, obviously you have, but I haven't. I'm trying to improve. You know, I don't want to say anything bad about Tet McMillan because I love him. So I mean, I guess I'm not capitulating, but like I feel like I have Tet McMillan as a locked in top 30 overall receiver as a rookie, and I only have him 9 spots overall lower than where Leone has him I mean, I've drafted him a little bit. I'm not like not getting him.
Yeah.
So I don't really know even what to say. Like, he's the number 8 overall pick in the draft. Bryce Young took a really nice step in the second half of last year. So I'm buying him as at least a quarterback that can get the ball to Tet McMillan.
Yeah.
And Tet McMillan, like, he's going to be given every opportunity to be a clear-cut number 1 receiver right away. And I think he's got that skill set too.
Yeah, I mean, if you're playing on like ESPN or something, like I'm looking at ESPN ADP right now, Ted McMillan is in the 80s. I don't think that's realistic in most competitive leagues. He's not going to go in the 80s. But this goes back to a point that we had earlier. Like, I think both compared to redraft ADP, both Evan and Leone are high on Ted McMillan. Leone is just higher.
Leone is just hyper aggressive. Which, dude, we've been talking about the whole show how I'm hyper aggressive on this guy.
You're like 5 rounds
Go
hyper
do your
aggressive.
thing.
I'm 2 rounds.
Do you, Leone? I respect it. I'm not capitulating, but do you?
Well, the Fantasy Pros ADP on McMillan is 64. I don't think that ESPN ADP is really good. Obviously, you want to adjust for your league. If it is, we are aggressive on McMillan, who is the 8th overall pick in the draft. Those guys generally tend to come with an immediately high target share when you're in that top 10. Second wide receiver, if you count, Travis Hunter as a wide receiver in the draft. Absolutely nothing in his way in terms of earning a day 1 target share and a high day 1 target share. And this is the kind of guy where we have him ranked is maybe a small miss, but big hit player. We probably are a little bit aggressive on his base case, but if it turns out he's really good, there's nothing in the way of him smashing. He's an early declare. He's got good size and versatility. He ran some routes from the slot in college. Not saying he's going to do that with Carolina, but it just shows you the type of player that he is and can win in a lot of different ways. Pretty solid production profile in college. If you're playing on ESPN, and you can take him in the 60s, that's great, because at that point, he's not even really a small miss, big hit player. You're kind of just playing with house money if you can get him in the 60s. But we have him ranked in the 40s because I think that's certainly, if you're in a league that's a little bit more hip to taking rookies and understanding that upside, we're fine with you taking him that early.
Yeah, and I'll be working on the exploiting the default rankings probably in the next 10 to 14 days here to try to get it as accurate as we can for when people have the most drafts. But we're going to identify things like that if you're playing on ESPN, if you're playing for Yahoo, and how you can adjust your strategy if you think you can get guys like Ted McMillan in the 60s or 70s. I mean, just can alter your entire draft strategy in terms of what positions you attack early here in the draft. I'll try to stay consistent here on when it's a guy that both of you guys like, but one is higher. We're going with the guy who is higher. Leone gets the win there on Tetairoa McMillan. Let's go to the number 6 player, Trevor Lawrence. Silva is at 122 overall, the QB 10. Each are Leone not that much further behind in terms of overall rank, 137, but QB 20 here for Leone on Trevor Lawrence. So big difference there. QB 10 for Silva, QB 20 for Leone. Leone, go ahead on Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, I just think with each passing year, we start to get a little bit concerned as to how good Trevor Lawrence truly is. Has gone through some coaching changes. I think some of the past lack of success isn't entirely his fault. It's not like he's been bad. He just hasn't been really good. He does go off as QB 26. I think the way you want to play the strategy at the quarterback position is not to draft Trevor Lawrence at QB 10. You're really asking for a lot from him there. And it might happen with adding Travis Hunter and getting Liam Cohen as a much better coach for him. But if you look at the quarterbacks that Silva has ranked behind Trevor Lawrence, you've got CJ Stroud, who 2 years ago we were taking like in the Joe Burrow range, and now he has a bad year, he drops off. You've got Jared Goff, who I think is a regression candidate, but Silva himself has said how this is a team that's probably going to have to throw a lot more than they did last year. And even with that, they're one of the higher expected scoring teams in all of football, and TDs are kind of gold for pocket passing quarterbacks. So prefer Goff. Dak, I prefer him. We've hit on Dallas and really like the upside there. That's a team that could really just trounce Jacksonville in terms of volume and efficiency at the quarterback position. You've got younger guys in Bo Nix, Drake May, who have more rushing upside than Trevor Lawrence. You've got JJ McCarthy, who if he's just like 80 to 90% Sam Darnold, is going to outscore Trevor Lawrence. So
We just going to talk about every quarterback in the league or what?
Well, these are all the quarterbacks you have ranked behind Trevor Lawrence, and maybe head to head you could make.
Are we
a case
talking
for
about my
Lawrence over one of
rankings, or are
them.
we talking about Trevor Lawrence here?
We're
talking
quite
about,
literally
like, how I
talking
have all
about the
these guys
rankings. We're
ranked?
quite literally talking about the rankings. So that's why Trevor Lawrence should be closer to QB 20 than QB 10, Silva, because that's the debate.
Okay. Silva, go ahead on Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. The exact way that Leone came out there describing Trevor Lawrence, we don't know how good he is with each passing year. He's been through different coaches. He's been through different offenses. Who does that sound exactly like?
Jerry Jeudy.
That Liam Cohen
He's going to say Baker
coached
Mayfield.
last year.
He's going to say Baker Mayfield.
Oh, Baker.
That's the same. That's the exact same profile of Baker Mayfield.
And Baker's going QB 9. So you're saying if he hits the absolute ceiling, you're going to get him at a one spot profit next year.
And I think
if
that
it goes,
Liam
this is what I
Cohen-
talk about having to be right. If it goes 100% right, congrats. You're
Can we hit the
drafting Trevor
gavel
Lawrence
here?
QB 9 next year.
Leone, don't make me cut your mic. Go ahead, Silva.
I mean, I think that Liam Cohen is a really big deal. I think that Brian Thomas is a really big deal. And I think that Travis Hunter has a chance to be a really, really big deal. And I think that this can be the year that Trevor Lawrence takes the leap. And I'm willing to bet on that at pick number 122 overall and quarterback 10, where I have all those quarterbacks that you just rallied off. They're all in the same tier, but I have Lawrence like toward the top of the tier. And I also think that it's a big factor that Liam Cohen last year encouraged Baker Mayfield to run more. Baker Mayfield ran for almost 400 yards. He'd never run for even 200 yards in a season. And I think that Trevor Lawrence can run. So I think that can be a big factor. So we've got big-time weapons. We've got a much better offensive scheme. We've got a chance for Trevor Lawrence to add 2.5 points per game to his per week scoring via rushing. It's definitely something that is in his bag to be a productive rusher.
Yeah.
So I'm again, that's what I'm betting, and I have Brian Thomas super high, and I have Travis Hunter in a place where people are going to draft him. So I'm just bullish on the Jaguars' offense this year, and if that hurts me, I think that I have a good a good leg to stand on here, and I believe in Liam Cohen.
Yeah. Trevor Lawrence has been in the NFL for 4 years, never thrown more than 25 touchdown passes in a season. And we know that a lot of quarterbacks scoring, if you're not going to be a runner, and maybe he does take a leap as a runner, but if he's not going to be a runner, touchdown pass is going to be absolutely everything. I thought this was a really close debate. I agree more with the Leone rank than the Silva rank, but I'm going to give the win to Silva here just based on
this is how it goes.
Argument's sake. All right, we're into the top 5 now. 5 biggest disagreements for this season. Number 5 is Jaylen Waddle. Silva, 35 overall, the wide receiver 19. Leone, 53 overall, the wide receiver 29. This has been a controversial topic, Evan, where you have Jaylen Waddle ahead of Tyreek Hill.
I do have Tyreek ahead a little bit.
Okay, you made a change there. Okay, I didn't care.
But you're not. But based on my rankings, you're not going to get Tyreek Hill, and you're like 80% going to get Jaylen Waddle.
100.
Yes, and by the way, there is a timestamp on Silva's top 150 now. Shout out to the tech team, the tech lords, for actually getting that set up. So every time Silva makes a change now to his top 150, you'll see the time. And so on the latest change, I do see here 27 overall Tyreek Hill and number 35 overall in Silva's top 150 on Jaylen Waddle. But I digress. Evan, go ahead on Jaylen Waddle.
Yeah, and I think that this is kind of building in the fact that I think that there is a chance that Jaylen Waddle can emerge as the Dolphins' #1 receiver this year. He's 4.5 years younger than Tyreek Hill. If you read Matt Harmon's reception perception write-up on Tyreek Hill, like he took a big decline in his route success this past year. I think it was the lowest yards per route run of his career by like a lot. And also he has like a problem with Tua. Tyreek Hill has a problem with Tua that has not gone away. Tua was actually talking about it very recently, early in training camp. Like they have to repair their relationship and all these things. In practice so far in training camp, The reports on Jaylen Waddle have been very positive and a little bit lukewarm on Tyreek Hill. I mean, there's off-field stuff and there's on-field stuff with Tyreek Hill that I want to stay away from. And I think that betting on the younger player, almost a half decade younger, Jaylen Waddle, betting on him to take a step forward, I think that that's the smart play here.
Okay. Leone, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, this is another guy that we like a lot at cost, the projections team. We're like almost 2 rounds ahead of ADP. So talking about us being aggressive, being 2 rounds ahead on McMillan, we're 2 rounds ahead on Waddle, and Silva's another 2 rounds ahead on that, which is hard for me to wrap my head around as far as playing the game of fantasy football. With Waddle, I do like a lot of the bull case that Silva makes, but at some point we have to acknowledge, he was wide receiver 22 in points per game in 2023, dipped to wide receiver 49 last year. Obviously, the team had all sorts of issues with quarterback injuries, offensive line play, and whatnot last year. That affected Waddle, also affected Tyreek Hill. So I don't think it's totally fair to point out Tyreek Hill's yards per out run declining and not point out what happened to Jaylen Waddle on a per route basis as well, because he struggled there. So when you look at the long view of these players, it's going to be Tyreek Hill with just a much, much higher targets per out run, like not even close. So that's my biggest issue with how close Silva has these 2 players ranked. In general, I think Miami's offense is one to target. I mean, this is a team that people, I think, are overly scared of the Tua injury. If he stays healthy, it's a condensed offense that has tons of holes on defense. They're going to have to throw. We saw how high the targets per out run can get for both Waddle and Tyreek Hill. So I really like Jaylen Waddle, but it shouldn't be ranked as closely as Silva has it between those 2 receivers for Miami, or 4 rounds ahead of ADP on Waddle. 2 is more than enough.
By the way, one argument for Waddle that neither of you guys mentioned, they play home against the Bengals in week 16, home against the Bucs in week 17. I mean, you're going to be talking about some of the worst defenses in the league here playing each other in week 16 and 17 in good weather. And
when Tyreek Hill is off the roster by then, Jaylen Waddle is just going to cook in the fantasy playoffs and win everybody all the money.
That'd be nice.
You, Leone.
I got tons of Jaylen Waddle, man. I mean, we're Jaylen Waddle
Good,
stands.
so do I.
Yes. Well, I have to stay consistent here. Silva's going to get the win, a player that both of you are higher than market on, but Silva going significantly higher. I will say, though, Leone, I think Leone's points on maybe we're too early to write off Tyreek Hill are well taken. To me, that's one of the biggest questions in fantasy football. Like, do you think Tyreek Hill is cooked or not? And I think we're trying to middle it a little bit, which I think is right. But if you have a strong stance on that one way or the other, I don't know how you could, but if you did, you could have Waddle right where Silva has him realistically. Let's go to player number 4. This one has swept the nation, Evan. I mean, I'm in drafts now and I see Jahmyr Gibbs going 1 overall and I'm like, that Silva did it. You know what I mean? And I hear people on other shows being like, that Evan Silva guy, he has Jahmyr Gibbs number 1 overall. So it is absolutely sweeping the community right now. To be clear, Silva has Jahmyr Gibbs number 1 overall. We've actually moved up Jahmyr Gibbs a bit lately. Also in the ETR ranks, Leone is up at number 4 overall on Jahmyr Gibbs. So not a big disparity here, but I just want to include this one because number 1 overall pick is always going to garner a lot of attention and a lot of eyes. So Evan, go ahead on Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah, and my argument for Jahmyr Gibbs was largely made when we talked about Jameson Williams, who was the first player that we discussed. But I think that this is a team that's going to play from behind more. That absolutely favors Jahmyr Gibbs over David Montgomery. I expect the Lions, under their new offensive coordinator, John Morton, to streamline the offense and to not just try to keep everybody happy. Like, he's going to feature the most explosive players, and he's going to have to feature the most explosive players because the Lions aren't going to be as good this year. They're not going to be a 13, 14 win team. They are going to be, I think, more like a 9 to 11 win team, and they're going to be in more competitive games. And so that's going to dictate that John Morton plays the better players. The losses on the offensive line, Frank Ragnow, Kevin Zeitler, those absolutely affect David Montgomery more than they do Jahmyr Gibbs from an on-field standpoint, because Jahmyr Gibbs is the guy that you want to get the ball to on the edges and throw the football to, circumvent the defense so you don't have to deal with a bunch of interior penetration. Yes, and I think that Jahmyr Gibbs, like by the end of this season, people will talk about him like that's the best running back in the league. This guy had 20 touchdowns last year. Reminds me of the Jamal Charles, Thomas Jones situation, the Chris Johnson, Lendale White situation. Dave Montgomery can still be a fine player, but I think this offense moves in the direction of Jahmyr Gibbs 65 to 70% of the time instead of an even split, because the Lions are just going to be in more competitive games. And also Jahmyr Gibbs, even though, and I think their throw rate is going to go up, which Leone agrees with me on. Jahmyr Gibbs, with a lower throw rate the last 2 seasons, had over 50 catches in both years. And they've been talking about using him at wide receiver. Maybe that's not going to come to fruition, but I think he can get up into the 70 catch range, and that would be friggin' huge for Jahmyr Gibbs.
Indeed it would. Leone, go ahead on Jahmyr Gibbs. And by the way, I did note that we did make some recent bumps. So I think we had Jahmyr Gibbs like 7th or something, and we're up to 4th now on Jahmyr Gibbs in the half PPR.
Yeah, it's a really tight first round. I do roll my eyes a little bit when I hear kind of the Jamal Charles, Thomas Jones comp stuff. I talked through this with Gretch, but Thomas Jones was 32 and 33 years old, averaging 3.4 yards per carry with Kansas City. That's not what we're seeing with David Montgomery. David Montgomery is still a very good running back. David Montgomery averaged 4.6 yards per carry 2 years ago, 4.2 last year. He's their grinder. He scored 25 rushing touchdowns the last 2 seasons. There are some very good quotes on Gibbs playing more, but you can't just look at the quotes that support your side. And you keep talking about the offensive coordinator switch and how they're going to, streamline the offense. Well, the head coach is still Dan Campbell. This is what Dan Campbell said. Believe me, David Montgomery is not forgotten. We know exactly who he is, where he is, and what he's capable of. The 1-2 punch with he and Jahmyr Gibbs is special, and it's rare in this league. There's a place for David. He's going to help us, and we're going to use him, and we'll use he and Gibbs together. We'll do some of those things. We know he's one of our best offensive players. That's not changing. So I think it's a little unfair to kind of just act like this season's going to go a very particular way. Is it in the ceiling range of outcomes for Jahmyr Gibbs? Absolutely. I don't want to dog on Jahmyr Gibbs, who's truly a special player. But when we're talking an incredible amount of opportunity cost at the beginning of the draft, another situation where Silva has to be dead on right. And he's more right than almost anyone out there when it comes to football takes like this. But I don't, as a fantasy player, want to put myself in a position where I absolutely have to be right. Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley, we got into the playoff weeks. If David Montgomery's still there, they don't have to deal with that. These are 2 elite fantasy backs with really huge ceilings. Maybe Jahmyr Gibbs' 99.9th percentile ceiling is a bit higher than these guys, but the 95th percentile ceiling that's more likely to occur is not higher. And you talk about ceiling, dog CMC. CMC is a player that has, breakaway run ability combined with huge catch volume. Like, if you're going to chase that type of ceiling, why bury CMC and up Jahmyr Gibbs? I get kind of the injury risk thing there, I guess, plays into it a little bit. But that's sort of my whole spiel is like, if you're in an auction league, pay less for Jahmyr Gibbs than you have to for Saquon Barkley and Bijan Robinson. Like, that's fine if you think that way. But if you're sitting there with the 101 and you can take Jamar Chase, Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson, I think it's too cute to take Jahmyr Gibbs. You don't need to do it.
Okay, yeah, and I think that's a really sound argument there. I'm going to give the win to Leone. The other thing that I would say is like,
it was a great argument, Leone. You were right. You won that one. It's a better argument. I'm not moving Jahmyr Gibbs, but he had a better argument. There's no question.
Like, the pain of me watching Dave Montgomery get like drives to himself and goal line carries after I took Jahmyr Gibbs 1 overall. Just like my mental anguish. I couldn't face it. And by the way, I did have to pull the numbers here. In the games that Dave Montgomery was active for last season, there was 14 that Dave Montgomery was active for. Jahmyr Gibbs only averaged 13.3 carries, 2.7 targets per game. Gibbs also scored 6 of his 20 touchdowns in those 3 that David Montgomery missed. So I'm not trying to say anything bad about Gibbs. I would take him probably 5th or 6th overall. But yeah, he's an absolutely incredible. I just don't want to discount Dave Montgomery usage either here.
I did just want to say one thing real quick, and I like Sam Laporte and Amon-Ra St. Brown a lot too. We haven't talked about it in Detroit with them having to throw more, but there's some stuff in terms of the running back fantasy points. Like Silva says, they're not going to be as good this year. They're not going to score as many points. They're not going to run as much. Yes, that
I don't
could
know if
lead
they're
to
not going to
more.
score as many points, though.
They're not going to score as many. If they're not going to, I mean, they scored a cajillion points last year. They're almost assuredly not going to score more points. And if they're going to run less, like I get that from a game flow, you're thinking like, oh, it's a Gibbs game flow, but you're also just reducing running back fantasy points. All those things Silva says are less running back fantasy points as a whole. Like that's not necessarily a good thing if we get some regression there.
Yeah. Lions averaged 33.2 points per game last year, and the next closest team was the Bills at 30.9. If you look at implied team totals for this year, obviously Lions are way, way, way lower.
Yeah. I mean, all right, they're probably not going to hit 33 a game, but I mean, I think that they can still absolutely be a top 5 team in scoring.
For sure.
That's
fair. And also I think that they're going to throw the ball more. They're going to have to throw the ball more. And that can just lead to more. I mean, that's going to lead to more receptions and more PPR points.
Let's go to number 3, Brian Thomas. We already kind of covered this with the Trevor Lawrence stuff, but Silva's going to be higher on Jaguar stuff than Leone. Silva 7 overall on Brian Thomas. Leone 14 overall, more in line with market there on Brian Thomas. So Leone's probably biggest hit last year was being higher than anyone on Brian Thomas. Now we get him here as a borderline first-round pick. Leone goes ahead on BTJ.
I think after CMC, there's a clear top 7 players, and then there's like an 8 through 16 that it's really hard to nitpick any of these players. There's a lot of personal preference there. I think Brian Thomas could go as high as 8th. He's a pretty special player. We saw that year 1. If I'm nitpicking, he did have an overwhelming amount of production, kind of like late in games. That was maybe a little bit fluky. They bring in Travis Hunter. If Travis Hunter is a special player, I don't think that's like bad for Brian Thomas, but it might limit the ceiling case a little bit. And we're talking a bunch of really good round 1 players here. There's prospects like Ashton Genty who are like kind of surefire picks when you look at the prospect profile and capital for a running back there. Malik Neighbors was a better prospect than Brian Thomas, really beat Brian Thomas quite a bit in targets per route run, is getting improved quarterback play. I think if we knew Stafford was healthy, but we don't, I'd take Puka. Him and Nico Collins were better peripherally than Brian Thomas, as good as Brian Thomas was. I'm nitpicking all of those, but that's why Silva has Thomas 7th and we have him 14th. We just kind of slightly prefer these other players.
Yeah, and I want to reiterate that what Leone said, the first round is so tight. That 8 to 16 range is so tight. If we move just a hair of stuff in projection, it moves the rankings a lot here. But Silva, go ahead on BTJ, higher than market at 7 overall.
Yeah, I think that we're going to talk, just like we're going to be talking about Jahmyr Gibbs as the best running back in the NFL after the year. I think that we're going to be talking about Brian Thomas as the best wide receiver in the NFL after this year. He's 22 years old. He was 6th in the NFL in yards per route run last year in a Doug Peterson offense. The game has passed Doug Peterson by. That's why he doesn't have a job anymore. And now Liam Cohen comes in. And under Liam Cohen last year in Tampa Bay, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin both had the highest yards per route run of their entire careers. And they're like aging players on the back end of their careers. Brian Thomas is 22 years old. So this is a talent bet again. And I don't see it as Leone does with 2 tiers in the first to early second round. I see it as like 14, 15 guys kind of all in the same tier, kind of ending with McCaffrey at 15 for me. I know that's obviously lower than anybody else, but I see it really as just a massive glut of guys who you can justify almost anywhere in there. And I think that Brian Thomas has just as good a chance as any of these other receivers to finish as the wide receiver 1 overall. I think that CeeDee Lamb has a chance, obviously, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. But I think Brian Thomas's chances of doing that are only very slightly less, very, very small probability. I think that he's got just as good a chance to finish as the wide receiver 1 as almost anybody else.
So like the yards per out run, like solidifies Brian Thomas as being amazing, the 6th overall. but he should be 6th overall if we're taking him, 7th overall, because Ladd McConkey, Amon-Ra St. Brown, A.J. Brown, Nico Collins, Puka Nacua all had higher yards per route run than Brian Thomas, Drake London, Justin Jefferson with higher targets per route run. Drake London with higher targets per route run than Justin Jefferson.
Right, but we're not just ranking all the players based on last year's yards per route run.
No, but I'm just saying, like, he
did it as a 22-year-old rookie in a Doug Peterson offense with Mac Jones starting a bunch of games.
Yeah, he's awesome. It's worth giving the context of where we're placing him in the draft. That's the entire debate is, 7th versus 14th.
Okay. I'm going to give that one to Silva. I thought it was a passionate and good debate there on that one. I will give the edge to Silva on the argument. Mainly, BTJ got done with Mac Jones, man. I mean, how can we not love it? All right. Just 2 left here. I tried to get 2 interesting ones here for the end. Number 2, Jackson Smith in Jigba. Silva is at 22 overall, the wide receiver 12. Leone is at 39 overall, the wide receiver 18. We did reach out to Brian Hartline and ask if he could join for this segment of the show. Long-standing bit, of course, on this show is what Brian Hartline thinks. Brian Hartline thinks Jackson Smith and Jigba is the best receiver he's ever had. And who are we?
I actually went back and fact-checked that, and he said it was Marvin Harris Jr.
No.
Marvin Harrison Jr.
No.
Yeah. Brian Hartline, the Ohio State wide receivers coach, I mean, he said that JSN was the best out of all of them. The wide receiver year.
Marvin Harrison went fourth
overall.
overall.
Do you think that you know better than Brian Hartline?
I think I do. In this case, Marvin Harrison's better than Jackson Smith and Jigba. So, yeah, I'll take that one. Bring it on, Hartline.
Dude, I Googled it and I looked at it and I was like, oh shit. But he did have JSN second.
Okay. Well, maybe it looks like Marvin Harrison better have a good year, because based on year 1, Brian Hartline might not know what he's talking about.
The bit was a farce.
The bit was like all bits, it turned out to be a farce. But anyways, Leone, I'll let you go first here on being lower than Silva pretty significantly here. 17 spots lower and 6 wide receiver spots lower on JSN.
I mean, Silva wiped the floor with me on this one last year. I want to like JSN as much as Silva does. I thought I would the beginning of the offseason. I just have concerns over the identity of this team being a bit more of a run-first football team. I have some concerns over the quarterback play, and I think that in particular affects how you're evaluating JSN at such an early portion of the draft, that there's a 25% chance we get Jalen Milroe for the playoff weeks. Do you want a 2-3 turn Jackson Smith and Jigba on your playoff roster? But the one thing I'll say to is I think a lot of the third round receivers, Terry McLaurin, Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, I think they all have warts. So I kind of just find myself straying from wide receiver there. I'll take a stab at an elite quarterback if they last. I'll maybe reach on Breece Hall or Marion Hampton a little bit in that middle of the third round, because I think all the receivers are shaky. I don't think Jason's necessarily way more shakier than the others, but it's not a pick I'm comfortable making the top half of the third round right now.
Yeah, agree with that. And especially in the half PPR formats, I take elite quarterback there, every time for me over some of these shakier wide receivers. Silva, go ahead on another year of high ranking on Jackson Smith and Jigba.
Yeah, so I'm not real worried about Jalen Milroe coming in at the end of the year. I mean, the Seahawks gave Sam Darnold a 3-year, $100.5 million contract with $55 million guaranteed. That guaranteed money goes into next year. I think he's going to get the full season. He was with Clint Kubiak, the Seahawks' new offensive coordinator in San Francisco, so they have that tie. I mean, they gave him a bunch of money. He has coaching staff ties. I know that he, has this tendency to flop in big moments, and he's kind of like not all there mentally, I think, at some times. Like when things get tough, like Sam Darnold is, doesn't always perform. But I think he's going to get the full season in Seattle, and I think that he's shown over the years that he can get the ball to receivers. Like Robbie Anderson had some big years with him. DJ Moore was kind of revitalized with Sam Darnold in Carolina for a minute. Jordan Addison was the wide receiver 18 at a breakout year with Sam Darnold at quarterback last year. Justin Jefferson was the overall wide receiver 2. If you look at the target competition for Jackson Smith and Jigba in Seattle, like I think that Cooper Kupp is washed. I think the Rams think that Cooper Kupp is washed. Marquez Valdez-Scantling is their number 3. They just got rid of Noah Fant. This is a first-round pick. Jackson Smith and Jigba was a first-round pick. He's 23 years old. He's coming off a 100-catch breakout season. So, with minimal target competition and what I believe is fairly stable quarterback play, okay? At least quarterback play that has shown consistently over the years to a number of receivers that he can get the ball to a particular receiver, if not 2, consistently. So these young receivers, like these guys are absolute studs, guys that I want to bet on, guys that I want to get on my fantasy teams. I have a ton of JSN. As you can imagine, because I have him 22nd overall. But I strongly believe that he's like a 2-3 turn pick. And I think that's where he should be being drafted. Obviously, I have him ranked there.
Okay.
I hope he hits the Bull Case Silva outline because I really like him. But having him, in a half PPR ranks ahead of Bucky Irving, Josh Jacobs, Omarion Hampton, T. Higgins, ahead of the elite quarterbacks, you're really, again, paying for the top here.
Yeah. That was a short argument, but that was exactly what I was going to say. And so I'll give the win to Leone here. We've seen multiple coaching staffs just be like, you know what, on JSN, we're going to throw it to him real short. And in half PPR, 8 for 60, which I think is going to be a lot of outcomes for JSN, is fine, but far from a smash there at 22 overall. So I'll go ahead and give the win to Leone there. Let me tack up the score here before we go into the finals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 for Leone, which I believe means 10 for Silva. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yes, 10-9 Silva on the judges' scorecard coming into the final here, which is going to be the one that everyone's been waiting for. Number 1 debate of the 2025 season. Cue the Many Men song. Ricky Pearsall. Silva is at 63 overall, the wide receiver 34. Leone, who didn't want to do this, believe me, if it was up to Leone, we'd be much lower on Ricky Pearsall still. Leone, 79 overall, the wide receiver 43. Leone, you first on Ricky Pearsall.
Yeah, I'm fine where we have him. We've come up. The offseason's broken pretty well for him. I just think Ricky Pearsall's being treated as a better player than he is, or than the evidence suggests he is at this point. He's going to get the opportunity in a pretty efficient offense to pay off this tag, and there is upside there. But we're talking about a player that had a 1.44 yards per route run. Keon Coleman, for example, had a 0.2 yards per route run higher than Ricky Pearsall on more volume, and has kind of the same excuses as to, he was really kind of breaking out before he broke his wrist, and he goes 3 rounds later. If you look at JJ Zachariason's year 2 kind of prospect scores at lateround.com, he's incredible at this stuff. He has Keon Coleman with a higher year 2 model score, and he has Ricky Pearsall pretty similar score to Xavier Legette. Pearsall was an older prospect who went in the end of the first round, but that was much earlier than he was kind of projected to go. And typically with older prospects who hit long-term, they've shown much more upside in that very first year. And a lot of people say, well, he was coming back from
getting shot.
Yeah. So a lot of people use this argument, but after he was worked in and they kind of featured him, even after he was worked in, he had a 3-game stretch where he didn't record a yard. He had a 5-game stretch where he had 21 yards on a 64% route share. That is so incredibly difficult to do. It's hard to even fathom. And then he blows up in one of the final 2 games of the season, and it's like that's all forgotten. The blow up is super important, but so is everything that led up to that. You can't ignore that. And people who act like there was this linear uptick as he worked his way back from injury, there is absolutely nothing to support that's what happened. If you look at the targets per route run with Deebo Samuel off the field, since obviously people are saying, hey, there's no Deebo. Brandon Ayuk, 36%. Juwan Jennings, 35%. George Kittle, 27%. Ricky Pearsall, 21%. Those three guys are on the roster. Obviously, Ayuk is going to miss a few games due to injury, but you've also got CMC now coming back. That's the pass rate on this team is most likely going to be lower than it was last year, even if they're more pass happy than they have been historically. If you look at the amount of games they won last year, their win total this year, and you also add in the fact that CMC is going to change the play calling a little bit, he's fourth on the totem pole down the stretch here. He's really got to make his way early and show it in a big way. And could he do it? Yes. But the market, and I think Silva, just has more confidence than he's good than is deserved.
Okay. Very well thought out case there from Leone. This is going to be a big one here, Silva. Go ahead.
Yeah, Leone did some prep before this one. I could tell. Hats off, man. Yeah, so Leone is holding against Ricky Pearsall. Targets per route run and yards per route run, which are great metrics. I mean, I think yards per route run is the best wide receiver metric that we have. But holding his efficiency numbers against him when Ricky Pearsall got shot and missed everything. Like, he missed everything. I think that there's a blind spot in Leone's model or in his spreadsheet that doesn't account for guys who were first round picks who went through some like kind of tumultuous things in their rookie years and then didn't have like the efficiency marks that he's looking at. That's why he missed on Jackson Smith and Jigba. That's why he missed on Jameson Williams, and now he's going to miss on Ricky Pearsall because he can't fit context into his spreadsheet. The guy got shot, okay? He got shot in the chest, got his gun back, got his Rolex back, okay? I mean, and you're going to hold that against him. You're literally
I'm not holding
that
it. I'm saying this guy's had one good week in his entire NFL career.
Also, Matt Harmon's reception perception was talking about how Ricky Pearsall over the final month of the season was just crushing against man coverage, which I think is a solid indicator. And also, when Ricky Pearsall was drafted, I think he was ticketed to be the eventual replacement for Deebo Samuel, who is now gone. So I think this can be a manufactured touch play. We remember monster, like 30, 40-point weeks that Deebo Samuel would put up in his prime. So this can be a manufactured touch player who wins against man coverage, playing in what perennially is one of the highest efficiency offenses in football. I mean, and he was a first-round pick, and you have to consider context for why his, on paper efficiency metrics were not up to where we would expect.
Right, but he wasn't that good of a prospect, and we have nothing. Even if you're saying to discount the rookie year, then you're just pointing to kind of.
He was enough of a prospect to be the 32nd overall pick in the 31st overall pick in the draft. I thought he's a pretty damn good prospect.
I thought they took him with the intention of letting Deebo go and putting Pearsall in some version of this Deebo role, right? So anything that they got the first year, I thought was kind of a bonus for them. They were preparing for Deebo to leave. I'm going to give the win to Silva here, and I'll tell you why.
This is outrageous.
I'll tell you why. I was playing in a poker game, and a guy was telling a story. An old guy was telling a story about how someone tried to rob him for his Rolex. And the guy says, some guy came up to him, put a gun on him, said, "Give me your watch." And the guy, and this guy that I know said, "You know what? F you," and just started running the other way. And I said, "Man, are you crazy? I would have given him the watch in a second. I don't want to get shot." And he looked me right in the eye and he said, "That's because you never worked for anything in your entire life." And I thought that was just an amazing line. He's like, "I worked too hard for the Rolex. I'm not giving it up." Ricky Pearsall also worked too hard for his Rolex. He's not giving it up. Win to Silva. Final score: Silva 11, Leone 9. We will be back in either January or February to go over all of this once again and find out who actually won based on results. Last year, we only did 13 guys, I believe, and it was 8-5 Silva in terms of results. We'll see and I believe Leone smoked the year before that. So we'll see what happens in the rubber match here for 2025. Of course, this was a ton of fun. huge thanks to Evan and Leone for putting in the work and their necks on the line for this show that everybody I know looks forward to every season. Stay tuned. Next show is coming soon. It'll be a look at the quarterback landscape for fantasy in 2025 with myself, Leone, and JJ. Also, I mentioned at the top, but again, we are going to do another man versus machine-ish type show on August 11th record. The way to get your questions in for that show is to put them in the YouTube comments. Again, we will be reading all the YouTube comments for this and hopefully picking out some really good questions to answer on August 11 related to these debates. For Evan, for Leone, producer Ryan, producer Luke, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.